This is not how I imagined my first day.
Welcome to the channel today, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to be talking about how Resident Evil 7 was basically a test for the RE engine, and Resident Evil 7 incorporated a lot of elements from the previous games, and I'm talking about Resident Evil 1 through 6. It's like they took the best parts of these games, removed some of the worst parts, and made a really good survival horror game from it. However, it does seem like Resident Evil 7 was also a test and a foundation for all future RE games, and there's a lot of evidence to provide for this, and I will be providing that in today's video, so I do hope you enjoy this topic as it's something interesting to explore. And I just want to say, for all intents and purposes, there's nothing wrong with using this as a foundation for the game. It's basically the same way Resident Evil 4 was the foundation for 5 and 6. So let's get into some of the points that I want to talk about that are important and what I think are going to be imported into all future RE titles. Now, the first one is getting back to the horror theme. Now, as many of you may remember, Resident Evil 5 and then 6 kind of took away from the horror theme completely. Resident Evil 4 was kind of on the fence, it had it there, but then there were moments where you were just blasting through the foes like they were nothing. And Resident Evil 7 took us back to that feeling of having absolutely no power, feeling like the character is dragging along. If you remember, Ethan basically sprinted at a very slow pace. This mixed in with the fact that you couldn't really have any ability to punch or combat the enemies anymore, and the CQC being removed meant that Ethan was weaker than any of the protagonists we'd been recently acquainted with. Combine this with the number of enemies that were thrown at us, the lack of access to weapons early on in the game, as well as the fact that we had to fight a boss basically that was invincible for the most part, and within the first 30 minutes of gameplay we've basically already cut our wife's head off. The horror was definitely back. They'd gone back to a more immersive storytelling. Now, there are a lot of criticisms to be made about Resident Evil 7, but it did execute a lot of things well, and it looks like Resident Evil 2's remake is taking a lot of inspiration from Resident Evil 7. Like I said, the horror theme coming back is good. As you noticed in Resident Evil 7 with the lack of CQC, there is no, at least what is shown up to now, CQC system in Resident Evil 2 remake either. So we're not going to be going around backflip kicking the zombies or anything. Maybe with the Ada sections, if there are any, or Hunk, I would be able to believe it because they are trained soldiers. Leon is just a rookie police officer, and also the fact that Claire Redfield is a very young college student. It's not like these two are very used to combat in general, and especially against BOWs. So it looks like the player will have to rely on their own brains, as well as your firearms, to manage the enemies around the environment. And as well, you will get a knife to actually attack the enemies with, but you're not going to be stun locking the enemies like in Resident Evil 5 and go and hit in a quick prompt. It looks like they're going back to that more atmospheric and immersive feeling that Resident Evil 1, 2, 3, and 7 really emphasized. They introduced a new fuse box system where we had to get fuses and manage them within our inventory, as well as the fact that we didn't get fuses to unlock all of the areas at once at certain points in the game in Resident Evil 7, and it looks like this fuse box system will be reintroducing itself to Remake 2. Now, we've had to manage power in all sorts of versions, but this is a version that is copied from Resident Evil 7, so it is very likely to assume the micromanagement will be handled in a much similar way, and it is definitely inspired as the model looks identical. Now, if you remember, one of the biggest selling points of Resident Evil 7, and something they even made an independent presentation on, was how they used photogrammetry so much in Resident Evil 7. Now, this wasn't the first time it's been used in the series, but it was the first time it was used so prominently. Most of the assets in Resident Evil 7 were scanned before being touched up, and it looks like Resident Evil 2's remake is going to follow the same route, which means that all future future titles on the RE engine looks like they're going to be using photo scanned assets, and this is kind of confirmed by the fact that they actually hired actors to be used as models, because otherwise why would they pay actors when they could just do it by hand? They did it for a photo scan, of course, and this is lining up with the idea that photogrammetry has been heavily implemented into Resident Evil 2's remake. This is of course a good thing because the graphical fidelity is just as high, if not better, than hand designed models, as well as speeding up the entire process, which means that the artists can make very beautiful and aesthetic environments at a much quicker rate, and you can prominently see that is the case whenever you look at gameplay of just a little section of the RPD. Due to the reuse of some assets, however, and the mechanics associated with them, I would assume that these will probably be implemented in future development titles as well as Resident Evil 2's remake. It looks like these ideas are here to stay for a while, just like Resident Evil 4 invigorated and rechanged the gameplay style of the franchise and heavily influenced quite a numerous amount of titles. Now, when talking about the OST of Resident Evil 7, there aren't really any memorable songs that come to mind other than the save room theme, because that was the only time you didn't really hear anything else. Mostly when you were going throughout the house, you could hear all the noises such as the wind and the rain pounding against the windows, and I will demonstrate that here. And it looks like Remake 2 is going to follow suit. This was not only confirmed by the developers, who did say that the Resident Evil 2 remake is going to have its OST toned down in favor of atmospheric immersion, but you can also sense it from the hallways and also from the environments, where there is very little or airy music playing, and mostly it's just the rampant noises of the environment around you.
You got this.
As demonstrated with the previous clips, you can see that Resident Evil 7 was definitely used as an inspiration for how the sound engineering should be developed and utilized around the environment. It does seem like there are going to be parts where there is some music playing, however it does seem more airy and less musically immersive than the original Resident Evil 2. However, there is, as I've said before, a deluxe edition that allows you to switch back to the original OST if you really did enjoy it that much. The song in the background, for example, is Ada's theme extended from Resident Evil 2 itself. Also, the way you assign your weapons to specific keys or D-pad allocations, as well as the UI of Resident Evil 7's inventory management, is making a return to Resident Evil 2. So it looks less like the original and more like Resident Evil 7, and this is a more minimalistic approach, which does increase the immersion and keeps the background of the environment always there. However, it does seem like the game is going to pause when you do go into the menu, and considering that Resident Evil 2 has a very immersive and minimalistic approach, kind of like Dead Space, I would really love to see them have a difficulty like Dead Space, where when you go into your inventory management, the game does not pause and everything does continue on, so that you're never really safe, and the only time you really feel like you have a breather to really manage things is when you're in a save room with a storage box. I would really hope that is going to be a thing, because the inventory management pausing the game makes the game a little bit too easy, movie and is definitely a step away from making it a truly survival horror project. Everything else seems to have been done absolutely perfectly, but it looks like a lot of inspiration was taken from Resident Evil 7, and I have talked about this in this video and provided some actual points as to the specific things they have done and used as a foundation. Who knows how far this actually goes? We'll just have to wait to see. All sorts of things might have been simplified, enhanced, or otherwise changed, but it does look like a lot of other elements are coming back from other various games, such as the dodge mechanic, as I've said before. So it looks like Resident Evil 2's remake is the love child of all of the Resident Evils, and especially 7 combined, all into one beautiful package. It's like they took the best elements of each part, like I said in the start of the video, and removed the worst parts as well. I hope you don't start trying to think this is a criticism video. It is just an analysis, because I do believe that the architecture and framework presented here is going to be what we should expect for all future RE titles in the near future. The same way that Resident Evil 4 was basically an inspiration for a lot of the main numbered titles, but also spin-off titles as well. If you have enjoyed the video anyway, guys, I have enjoyed making it, and I would appreciate it if you leave a like, a share, or a subscribe, or all three if you're feeling really spicy and want to have a really juicy day. But as always, guys, I just hope you have learned something. I hope you're having a beautiful day. Take it easy, and peace.